In November of 1988, Citadel Miniatures released a whole slew of Harlequin miniatures. These Harlequins would follow the previous Harlequin miniature boxed set and would come in a blister pack of 5. Amazingly, this 5-man set of metal miniatures would only set you back the paltry fee of £2.50. I'm not sure what that is in today's money, but I'm sure there's a couple of currency experts out there who can tell us. Now, these Harlequins were sculpted by expert Eldar sculptor Jez Goodwin, a man who is still sculpting wonderful Eldar miniatures to this day. I'm Marcel, and this is Snakeworks. I've always been a big fan of Harlequins. I really like the look of them. All those bright colours and interesting little patterns all over their bodies. However, I guess I've always been a little bit scared to attempt to paint them. Fear is the mind killer, eh? Alright then, so here's our first Harlequin today. So this guy, or girl, I think it's a guy, is really rather thin. Maybe the thinnest Eldar I've ever seen. I think the alien vibes were a lot stronger back in the 80s. They look almost like the aliens from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, as opposed to just humans with pointy ears. The Harlequin is wearing what I originally thought was a long red coat with lovely green detailing, but I've since realised it's a sash, or just a big hanky tucked into his belt. What amuses me though, is that although he's equipped with a really big sword, he's holding a golden pistol, awkwardly. It's facing the wrong way. Is he doing a Han Solo no-look shot? With this next Harlequin, we have found what I never realised existed, a miniature equipped with that crystal pistol from the art over the years. I always wondered if it would ever show up in miniature form, and it already had, in the early years. Crazy, I never noticed. The Harlequin himself is wearing a lovely green headband. A green headband the likes of which Mark Knopfler from Dire Straits would wear. Hands up if you know who Dire Straits are. Okay, you can put your hands back down now. The other weapon the Harlequin is equipped with is a sword. And not just any old sword, it's a black sword. Again, you don't see many of these. It looks a little bit like the dark saber from The Mandalorian. It's wonderful. The Harlequin is also wearing a shawl of sorts. Is that the correct name? Over his shoulders. It looks like something from House Cawdor in Necromunda. It's very medieval looking. Now, speaking of shawls, do you remember when ponchos were in fashion, or on trend as people like to call it nowadays? It must have been the early 2000s or something. I never had one myself, but I frequently borrowed one of my girlfriends. When we were drunk, of course. I'd never do it sober. I really should have just bought my own. I don't know what this is. Apparently this is a poncho. Look like Cactua from Final Fantasy. I've called this next Harlequin Axeman, and I bet you can't guess why. Now, Axeman is pulling a star pose, a power star pose. Why would anyone need to pull such a pose in battle? Only a Harlequin would know. Even then, I doubt they would tell you. On his axe arm, he has a very puffy sleeve. Again, it feels like it might be inspired by medieval fashion. I reckon they had 2 puffy sleeves, as opposed to just the one though. What's the correct name for them? Sleevus puffus? The Harlequin's axe is a sort that I've never seen before, and I don't recognise it at all. It looks a bit like a short version of a librarian's force axe. And now I've confused myself. Is it librarians or grey knights that use force axes? Could someone help me out here, please? We have a red-fisted Harlequin up next. He's quite interesting. The mask on his face reminds me of an Emperor's Children noise marine or something. I think it's the vertical grill. Were those things supposed to be speakers or something? As I said before, the Harlequin has a big red fist. It looks a bit like a power fist or a power glove. I wasn't aware that Harlequins had access to the power fists. Perhaps back in the Wild West of the Rogue Trader era, everyone had access to everything. We know they had access to Land Raiders, so why not power fists? I love the way our Harlequin here is pointing his pistol directly at the previous Harlequin's face.
Cease that ridiculous pose immediately!
You can't blame him, really. What idiot would pull a star pose? I feel a bit better now after that. Golden face, texture like sun, Harlequin, blue mohawk for good fun. I bet you don't know what that song was a reference to. So this Harlequin has an expensive looking golden mask. Maybe it was loot after he killed 10,000 Imperial Guardsmen or something. Now I never had Harlequins down as the golden mask types. I thought that was more of a Blood Angels thing. His left leg has a little stripe running down the side, a bit like the trousers that Han Solo wears. I think the correct term for those was Corellian blood stripes. I've no idea how I came by such an obscure piece of knowledge, but I never forgot it. The other leg is very different. Han Solo wouldn't be seen dead in that. We can see the Harlequin is wielding a pistol for sure, but what's the other weapon? It's like a sawn-off Harlequin's kiss or something. Can any of you tell us what that is? Now I call this next Harlequin Abaddon Topknot. Now let me know if you think you know why. Hint, the clue is in the name. The Harlequin is pulling a fantastic fencing pose. On guard! Now speaking of fencing, I remember having a thing for Rosamund Pike after her performance in that James Bond movie as a fencing instructor. For a Bond film, I think it was rather terrible, and I can't even remember the name of it. Was it Die Another Day? Continuing with the theme of interesting clothing, this Harlequin has a wonderful big lace cuff at the end of his arm, like something the guy from the House Makeover show would wear. Whatever was his name? Not Hugh Fernley Whittingstall, he was the chef. Lawrence Llewellyn Bowen, that's it. Wonder what he's doing now. Now do you remember when House Makeover TV shows were all the rage? It was DIY SOS, How Does Your Garden Grow? I think I just made that up. Ground Force with Charlie Dimmock. I saw her once outside Burger King in Norwich, of all things. That Burger King's gone now, which is a shame. Or was it Garden Force? Was it Ground Force or Garden Force? And there was Tommy, not Tommy Vercetti, I can't remember what the Tommy guy was called. That was a long, long time ago, when we used to watch terrestrial television. We have another Harlequin sporting a top knot up next, and again we have a less than tactical star pose. I wonder what the in-universe deal with the star pose is. Perhaps they're trying to keep warm on the battlefield by doing star jumps in an ice planet or something. His jumper looks like the one Freddy Krueger wears in Nightmare on Elm Street, which is weird as I just watched a whole YouTube video on the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. Maybe that's why I noticed the reference. He needs a claw.
Here's my Harlequin's kiss, bitch.
Now if you've played the game Golden Axe, you know it's named after the axe that the dwarf has. In this case, we have a golden sword. The dwarf in that game had a name like Oak Noggin or something, but today it's evaded me. I think I'm thinking of Thorin Oakenshield. Gilius Thunderhead, that's it. A brilliant name. Next up, it's a Harlequin with the biggest mohawk I think I've ever seen on a miniature. Are there any other factions that make use of mohawks? I say make use, not sure what use a haircut would be. Actually, surely that sort of thing would be more of a liability. The Harlequin is pulling one of those Bruce Forsyth poses you see in early miniatures. Again, I think this 2D pose is one of the limitations of casting at the time. But speaking of Bruce Forsyth, I do want to see him pulling this pose in a miniature form. Again, like the first Harlequin we saw, the pistol is pointed in a strange direction. This leads me to believe that both of these miniatures were based on the same armature. Not armchair, armature. I think that's the right word, like a skeleton for sculpting. The Harlequin's kiss that he's equipped with looks fantastic. It has a really long shaft. You could give someone a damn good poking with that. Now, I remember first reading about the Harlequin's kiss back when I was at high school. I think they call it secondary school nowadays. Someone brought the Warhammer 40,000 2nd edition War Gear book in, and we were reading through it in a science lesson. I don't know why we were reading a War Gear book in a lesson. Maybe we were on break or something, or maybe we'd finished all our work. Yes, that would have been it. We'd finished all our work ahead of everyone else, and we decided to read some Warhammer 40,000 reference material. Or we were just reading it when we should have been working. Excuse me, my script has fallen down. After the massive red mohawk from before, now we have a big green mohawk. I'm not sure it's as tall, but it certainly looks fatter, and I like the way it's been dry brushed. It looks a bit like a big tuft of grass. Lovely. I wonder if it smells of freshly cut grass when he visits the hairdresser. At first glance, I thought this Harlequin was wearing a kilt, but it's not a kilt, is it? It's a bunch of dangly bits. I think these are called terouges. A lot of my Space Marine Terminators have them. It's probably based on some sort of Roman legionnaire attire. We also have some more golden weaponry. Is this Harlequin warband rich? Do Eldar use currency in any way, shape or form? Is currency a thing in the 41st millennium anywhere? I can't say I've seen money or cash mentioned anywhere. We now get one of the best Oldhammer miniatures of all time. The Harlequin Solitaire. So good. The Solitaire is wearing a sweatband again, much like our friend Mark Knopfler. The sweatband was really popular in the 1980s. Musicians wore them, aerobics classes were full of them, and a lot of tennis players wore them. And you don't see them as much anymore. I wonder why that is. Maybe people sweat less now, or did they just not work? Interestingly, the jagged ends of the Harlequin's cape give him a sort of medieval fashion look again. So I suppose Harlequins are like jesters, and jesters were in medieval courts, hence the connection. What do you reckon? Now, I feel that medieval fashions need to make a return. I want some massive neck frills and collars, although I'd probably need a wider angle lens to fit it in. I might look like one of those dogs with the big... What the hell is the name of that dog collar thing when they go to the vet so they can't lick their own balls? I can't remember. Anyway, I want some lace cuffs and some capes with jagged hems. Apparently it makes you dance like a monkey. Anyway, what's the term, the correct term for jagged hems? It's not crenellated, is it? I think that's the sort of squared off battlement look, but I don't know what the jagged term is. Maybe it's just jagged. Now I have to apologise for swearing on this next Harlequin. I called him Golden Piss. You will see why in a few moments. This Harlequin's mohawk is a much more sensible size. It's not 2 feet high like the others. I wonder what they use for their hair products. I remember hearing that punks used soap as a styling product, and I do wonder if that's true. Now, when looking at him, he appears to be a lot shorter than a lot of the other Harlequins. Could he be a Juve? That might have something to do with his short mohawk. The taller the mohawk, the more veteran the Harlequin. Now, as I said before, the reason I called him Golden Piss is because it's a shortening of pistol. He has a lovely golden pistol. I imagine he hides it under his pillow every night before going to bed. This next Harlequin is pretty odd. He has big googly eyes. What's going on there? The eyes look like those sensor things that the smelly smoke comes out of. The thing Black Templars carry about a lot. Or ping pong balls with holes drilled in. Just take your pick. On his shoulders, he's wearing an interesting set of shoulder pads. They look very elaborate. They look to be multi-layered and bedecked with the finest jewels of the 40k universe. Do you think that diamond is still the rarest stone? Now Mr. Googly Eyes' weapon has a golden haft and a silver tip, almost as if the original tip broke and he had to replace it. We don't hear much about who creates weapons for the Eldar. Is it those bone singer guys? But these weapons don't look like they're made of wraithbone though. You know, that reminds me of Trigger's broom sketch from, I was going to say Fast and Furious, but I meant only Fools and Horses. If Trigger was in the Fast and the Furious, I feel that would be good. Now, as a kid, I absolutely despised Only Fools and Horses. However, later on, I started watching it when it was forced on me in the background, and I really enjoyed it. And it was one of those times where I feel I'd missed out on old good television because I just didn't give it a damn chance. I think my favourite episode was the one where you see them running down the alley as Batman and Robin. It was probably like Christmas 1992 or something. I think Jurassic Park came on after it. Aha! This time we have a Harlequin with a big mohawk and a stripe in his hair. Maybe he was inspired by Stripe, the gremlin from Gremlins. I remember my daughter saw the trailer for Gremlins once and she was terrified for weeks after. Poor girl. When I was a lad, it was Alien. This Harlequin has been painted in a very nice stormy blue colour scheme. It's very nice indeed. I think that probably has something to do with me liking blue. I always seem to fall back on blue. It's very strange, you know. His sword looks a bit weird, almost as if he's stuck half a sword on the end of a different sword. Maybe the sculptor broke it, lost it under his desk, and just attached whatever was left to hand. The good old void of the floor, hider of miniature parts since 1947. Ah, here comes who I called Yellow Kisser. It might sound like some sort of sexual act, but it's not. It's referring to his yellow Harlequin's kiss. Do I need to remind you this is one of the best weapons in Warhammer 40,000? I hope not. His green face with the red lips reminds me of the Lady Gremlin in Gremlins 2. Now, did she have a name? Also, that's another Gremlins reference today, and I wonder why I have Gremlins on the brain. I haven't seen that movie in years. We have a return to some medical clothing. Medical? I think I mean medieval. The autocorrect is up to its old tricks again. This time the Harlequin's boots have a sort of arrowhead tip to the top. The sort of thing I expect to see in a throne room. People still wear them in mine. We also have another piece of golden weaponry, a gun. Maybe they were inspired from Scaramanga, from Man with the Golden Gun. Now, what year did that movie come out? Which version of the theme song is better, Lulu's or Alice Cooper's? A lot of people say The Man with the Golden Gun is one of the worst James Bond films there ever was. They might be right. However, as a kid I really enjoyed it. But sadly I haven't seen that one for a long time, so I can't really give you an up-to-date review of it. I might have to go and watch that now. Bye! No. But anyway, my favourite James Bond film is probably The Spy Who Loved Me, purely for the skiing section at the start, and the White Lotus Esprit is by far the best James Bond car. Now, speaking of James Bond, hold on, I thought I had one. I lost it. Now, remember when we spoke about Fast and the Furious a little while ago? I have here a Ford F-150 SVT Lightning, which was featured in the first Fast and Furious movie with the Racer's Edge advert on the side of the door. And interestingly, if you turn it over, it has something to do with Warhammer. It says, if you're enjoying this video, then please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel. That means you, Bond, James Bond. If you are enjoying the content here on the channel, then please consider joining the Patreon, the link to which is in the description below or up here somewhere. Vision from the Avengers up next. Check out the lovely gem in his forehead. Let's hope Thanos doesn't spot him or he'll be trying to yank it out. Weirdly, his mask is already over a golden face. So is he wearing two masks? Is he stacking masks on top of each other? That's a weird fashion choice indeed. Now this time there are no stripes in the mohawk, but he does have some more lovely gems in his hair, a bit like the song. With rings on her fingers and gems in her hair, she will have Eldar whenever she's there. Did I get the lyrics right? What wonderful stuff. If you want to see some more Oldhammer videos, then check out the playlist up here somewhere. As always, thank you very much for watching, and always remember to drill your barrels.